Hello everyone, this is part 24 of What If Naruto Had a Proper Teacher, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Baki looked over the reports with concern. The war with the Wagakur had been going well, however now they were striking back. Several villages near the border had been destroyed by the Bakua Butai, Explosion Corps. They were a specialized set of Iwa shinobi skilled in the arts of demolition. What worried him was their delivery method. Somehow they were able to fly high above and drop their ordnance. There were few shinobi capable of anything akin to flight. There were very few large winged summons that could carry a shinobi. Flight was considered impossible even for futon specialists. That wasn't truly the case, as shinobi in the past had used gliders to float on and through the subtle use of wind chakra could keep someone afloat for an entire day. However, the land of Earth, including the Explosion Corps, normal mode of operation was to use the Earth as an entry and exit point, not the sky. The assistance from the other minor villages had been helpful, and with them some of the moderate Iwa towns had capitulated. But if they could not stop the bombing of their own towns, the economy would become crippled. Shinobi had to eat. They needed fresh gear such as kunai, soldier pills and explosive tags. Hi-no Kuni had been purchasing absurd quantities of them for the war effort in order to fill their kunai scrolls. A good blacksmith was currently worth his weight in gold. Previous wars had gone on longer, but this one threatened to be more brutal. As the economies of the elemental nations had advanced, they had become interconnected. This created a lot of efficiency, but it also meant that in times of war where trade lines were cut off, it meant rampant shortages. Baki cared more about the village than the civilians of his nation, but if they were harmed too significantly, the village would be vulnerable. Sunagakur grew almost none of its own food. The desert did not allow for traditional crops to be grown like in the fertile lands of Hi-no Kuni. For now it wasn't a critical issue, but if the war advanced much longer it could grow worrisome. Baki was eager for the war to end. He wanted to retire and hand over the mantle to his successor. Perhaps it is time to suggest to Jiraiya Dono that a bolder strike is required. Break. Neji and the others were taken to see Mifune. Before they were granted an audience, they had chakra-suppressing seals placed over them and were stripped of all weaponry. Tenten looked worried while Lee just looked resolved. If the worst came of the meeting, their fate would be in the taijutsu specialist's hands. He didn't need chakra to be a lethal weapon, and it was doubtful that chakra suppression seals would be able to stop the opening of the gates. They entered the room and saw Mifune flanked by Okisuke and Yurikaku. Around the room was a dozen armed and armored samurai, all with hands on their hilts. The young Hyuga could tell that they were already predisposed to be unfriendly. He bowed. Greetings, Mifune-sama. I hope to clear up any misunderstanding that has occurred. He motioned to his companions. These are Rock Lee and Tenten, my comrades. They each bowed and the Taisho looked at them gravely. You have been accused of attacking Kumo shinobi within our lands. Your village has also been accused of pursing a war in an effort to dominate the elemental nations. Neji could see his spandex-wearing friend fight back the urge to refute the man's claims. We have no knowledge of any such attack on Kumo shinobi. I would point out that it was Hi-no Kuni that was invaded, and prior to that it was our ally Takagakur that was assaulted, whom we defended. Okisuke glared at him. We are wise to your shinobi tricks. You provoked your enemies by stealing the demons. Neji looked at the samurai squarely in the eyes. You have been misinformed. That is the work of a band of missing nin called the Akatsuki. We have fought these Akatsuki and killed a number of them, including Hiden, Kakazu, and Itachi Uchiha. Missing nin. A convenient excuse, Okisuke retorted. Neji remained calm and dignified. It is the truth. Independent records can confirm Konoha claimed the bounty for Hiden and Kakazu. Yurikaku made a dismissive gesture. Proof that they were Akatsuki or that you slew them does not provide evidence that they are responsible for the capture of the Biju. Neji frowned. Kumo had gotten here before they did and had poisoned their minds to Konoha. Konoha is strong despite the invasion, but it is not so strong that it can simultaneously fight off a Wagakur and Kumogakur in the field while striking the heart of both villages. If you believed that, then you would believe we are nigh invincible. Mifune considered the words, and they had merit. It did seem strange that the Leaf Village was able to project such power while still fending off an invasion from 4 other villages. If they did have such strength, the war would soon be over and Konoha would reign supreme with her allies. He could not make the wrong decision. Why did your village destroy Moyogakure, village hidden in the haze, so completely? They were not even the primary parties responsible for the invasion. Neji bowed. I under your concerns Taisho, but it is because Jiraiya-sama wishes peace that he acted this way. Okisuke opened his mouth to speak but Mifune silenced him with a look. Our Hokage was sending a message to the minor villages. Konoha stands by its allies but will destroy her enemies. Because of our actions in the regrettable destruction of Moyogakure, it led directly to the capitulation of Shimogakure, village hidden in frost. While more lives were lost initially, it will lead to a greater preservation of life. We also ensured that the civilians were not harmed. Mifune considered the matter and knew that hard choices had to be made in times of war. Both Kumo and Konoha had compelling arguments to make. He could detect no falsehood in either party, but that was unsurprising. He was dealing with shinobi after all. At this juncture, however, he knew that there was no proof that Konoha had assaulted the Kumo shinobi. Kumo could have faked the attack. Konoha could have planned it. Another village that disliked either one of the villages could have done it. The evidence pointed in the direction of Konoha, but in many ways it was simply too convenient. A long silence stretched while the shinobi waited for the samurai's decision. Return the other 2 to their cells. And bring Mabui-san here. I would hear from the 2 parties directly and at the same time. Lee looked questioningly at Neji, who gave a slight shake of his head. As long as they had a diplomatic way out of this, they needed to take it. Break. Jiraiya glanced at the latest report from Naruto. They would be back in the village soon with the Land of Lightning border fortifications in ruins. Looking at the reports coming from the allied villages, and sooner it appeared things were going well there too. Like a snake they were constricting around Iwa. Soon the daimyo would have to attempt to break the sieges that were occurring on their major towns. When that occurred, the plan was to use Kakashi's team to ruthlessly crush the counter-attack. Meanwhile, Kumo would still be trying to come to terms with how to defend their own nation and would be in no position to counter-attack. Once Iwa forces were destroyed out of their village, away from the defensive ground they favored, the inevitable attack on their village would be much more likely to succeed. Rubbing his eyes, he put down the report and stretched. He summoned a clone to watch over things in the tower and went to see how Tsunade was doing. He was worried about her. He had wanted to pursue a relationship with her after the invasion, however with Shizune's death, it didn't feel like the timing was right. It had been a few months now, so maybe he could give it another go. At worst he would leave with a few new bruises, and at best he could fulfill one of his lifelong dreams. He had to clear his mind first. Thoughts about Yahiko and the others were never far from his mind. Why had he joined the Akatsuki? If Nagato was still alive and using the power of the Rinnegan, what were his objectives? Why had his students gone so far off the path he had set him on? I guess I now know what Sensei must have gone through after Orochimaru's defection. Forcing the thought out of his mind, he left the tower and headed out to find Tsunade. Break. Mabui had entered into the debate confident in being able to demolish her opposition. After all, she had the weight of evidence, truth and intelligence on her side. However, it soon became clear that the silver-tongued Hyuga could match her point for point. This was unexpected and troubling, but what troubled her more was the fact that she was starting to believe the Konoha shinobi. It boiled down to something quite simple. If Konoha was able to waltz into Iwagakure and Kumogakure with impunity, why hadn't they just finished both villages off? Their forces simultaneously fought 6S-ranked threats in 4 different locations. If they had that much power at the disposal, why hadn't they finished them off? Why bother with obliterating tiny villages and stepping cautiously around the major ones? With mounting horror, Mabui was beginning to realize the notion of a third player in the game who was hunting the Biju for their own ends was the only logical explanation. She kept the facade up and continued to defend her village and point out the trickery and vileness of Konoha. Even if they were innocent at this point, Kumo was their sworn enemy, and regardless of how the war started, they would need allies. But if they couldn't win the Land of Iron over to their side, she would recommend that the Raikage sue for peace. There was an enemy out there with 7 Biju who was also Kumo's enemy. Their actions had precipitated the war and all the misery that it had caused. And so she struggled to win the Land of Iron to her side, but her words rang hollow and she could see that the Taisho was turning away from her version of the events. Finally the talk was done and Mifune had heard all that he wanted to hear. Both of you have made convincing arguments and the truth probably lies somewhere in between. The samurai have maintained their neutrality for a reason. Shinobi affairs are fraught with trickery and one cannot know if a fight is against an honorable foe or mere shadows. I will watch the events carefully but will not interfere. Mabui had failed. The Raikage would not be happy. She watched as Neji bowed low and thanked the Taisho for his time. The old samurai inclined his head. However, while the armies of my land will not march, there will be those convinced that Konoha presents a danger. I will allow everyone to decide with their own mind and heart what the truth is. If they wish to unsheathe their swords in a cause they feel is just, I will not interfere. Mabui felt a tendril of hope bloom in her heart. It was not a complete waste. They could still bring some samurai with them. The Hyuga was bold and smiled. In that case I will also share Konoha's perspective amongst your people. Jiraiya-sama wants peace. Lasting peace that the elemental nations have never known. If your people desire the same, they can help us make that world a reality. The former assistant to the Raikage was disquieted by the statement. The Hyuga were respected in some quarters of Tetsu no Kuni. While she would do her best to convince them to join Kumo, if Neji did the same for Konoha they would probably break even. Their audience was over and Mabui had work to do as well as a message to send to the Raikage. Team 7 returned to Konoha and Naruto was anxious to hear how Neji, Tenten and Lee were doing. Word was that they were still recruiting samurai and that Kumo was doing the same, but for the most part the samurai armies would remain within their own lands. He was thrilled to hear that the mission was a success and anxious for them to return to Konoha. It sure is nerve-wracking to send shinobi out on missions. Naruto wouldn't have too much time to dwell on it as he and his team were going to be sent out again. This time they would be heading northwest and link up with the Suna forces that had cut off access to the roads in Chuchi no Kuni, Land of Earth. The larger towns would soon begin to starve, and unless Iwa fully abandoned the people of Chuchi no Kuni they would have to lash out and break the encirclements. And when they did abandon their highly defensible position within their village, Kakashi's team would be waiting to devastate them. It would be like the end of the Daisanji Ninkai Taisen, Third Shinobi World War, where Minato proved to be too dominant on the battlefield to be resisted. Team 7 would be used in the same way. And while Kumogaku rallied themselves in preparation to stop the invasion of their own land, they would not think to launch a fresh assault. By the time anyone realized that Konoha's greatest fighting force was on the march, the Iwa counter-offensive would be shattered. On paper it was simple, but there were dozens of things that Shikaku Nara had done to convince Kumo that the attack on the border forts were a prelude to a full-fledged invasion. Word was spread around the village that the Hokage wanted vengeance on Kumo for the attack. Shinobi were drilling and preparing the logistics for an attack. Plans were made for an attack that would not come, and Iwa would be crushed between the power of Suna, its allied villages, and Team 7. Naruto had 2 days to make clones and say hello to all his now former students. His name was on everyone's lips, the son of the Yondaime, the defender of Konoha and the personal trainer for the second chance, Shinobi. Sakura was aggrieved that there would be so little time to refine her Fuinjutsu Anbu suits. Fortunately the test suits had worked marvelously and she had 100 Naruto clones working on the seals for the suits. They would place them in stasis and have 200 suits ready for the actual Anbu units to use. The increase in survivability as well as the nasty surprises they held would go a long way in defending Konoha if an attack occurred while they were gone. Sasuke spent some time with his wife in hopes of getting the process of building the clan along the way. The union was chilly but they were both dutiful. She wanted a child that could give her the love that Sasuke would not, and he wanted a child to continue his clan's legacy. He was also reviewing the prospects for his second wife. Kakashi used the time to rest. He wasn't old by any means, but he certainly didn't have the energy his 3 young pupils had. Plus Jiraiya was generous in sharing some of his notes for his upcoming work. The standstill in Iwagakure could not continue. A new Chuchikage had to be selected. Juro Suzumori was the most dangerous shinobi Iwa had left to call upon. Calls for him to become the next leader of the village had been growing while Chuchi no Kuni was ravaged by war. The idea of becoming the next Kage after multiple failures was not something Juro's pride would allow him to swallow. Instead he fully endorsed the Onoki's granddaughter's ascension. While she was not the strongest in the village, she would grow into her power. Her Kekkei Genkai was flexible, and as she gained experience she would prove to be a formidable threat to any shinobi. The Yondaime Chuchikage was finally announced as Kuretsuki. She took up the hat knowing that her place was in the village and not on the fields of war. It was a great disappointment that she would be giving a speech to the gathered shinobi who would be coming to grips with the enemy as opposed to fighting alongside them. Shinobi of Awagakur. My grandfather believed in this village. Believed that we were destined for greatness. He was not wrong. He died on a foreign battlefield just like my father. Konoha and the two-faced ways must be eradicated. I swear to you we will not rest until every last vestige of that abominable village is ground to dust. This is the first step in reclaiming our honor, in reclaiming our glory. Go and kill in the name of your village. Juro cheered alongside the rest of the men. It wasn't the best speech, but it was full of passion. And for the utterly demoralized shinobi of the village it was what was needed. A renewed fire had filled the disenchanted eyes and they were ready to go and die for their village. Sunagakur had split its forces to hem in the various towns of their country. Divided they would not be able to withstand their offensive. Even with the reinforcements they received from all of the minor villages they couldn't withstand it. They would either have to retreat before the oncoming mass, which would lead to the towns being liberated and food and supplies being able to pass, or they would be destroyed. The head of Clan Suzumari knew that success wasn't guaranteed. Suna was adept at their hit-and-run tactics and could bleed their forces. That was why he was leading the shinobi force. His ability to sense the vibrations of the earth would not allow Suna units to hide and wait for the army to pass. In truth, he was not overly worried about the clash with Suna. While he dreaded additional casualties to the faltering Iwa shinobi body, he did not fear failure. What he feared was what would happen after. Konoha was the true threat. How could they be successful against the Leaf when they boasted the likes of Jiraiya, Tsunade, Kakashi, Naruto, Sasuke and Shikaku? They had eliminated the most powerful defenders of Iwa. Han, Roshi, Onoki and Kitsuki. Akatsuki would remain to guard the Chuchikage, that left only himself and a handful of a ranked jonin to deal with the inevitable battle with the Konoha. He could only give his best and hope that some of those dreaded monsters would fall in their battles with Kumogakur. Juro signaled and 3,000 shinobi moved out. An appalling number were genin, some hastily rushed out of the academy. He despised pushing them into the forefront of the war. They were leveraging the future to survive the present. They moved out and Juro wondered how many would make it back alive. Break. Hidaka Yotsuki wasn't used to failure. Not only had that fool Archoi survived the attempt to kill him, but the greater mission to ally the land of iron to their cause was ruined. They had gained a paltry 500 samurai where they had hoped to have 10 times that number. Worse was that Konoha was walking away with nearly the same amount. His uncle would not be pleased. And it was never a good idea to fail the head of the Yotsuki clan. Shivering despite the heat, he continued the journey and began making ready his excuses. Hopefully he would be able to blame that chit Mabui. The fool had actually been swayed by the enemy's words and had told him that she was going to suggest seeking an honorable peace. Yes, like Konoha would accept the near destruction of their village without due retaliation. The young shinobi glanced at Archoi and learned a lesson. Never underestimate someone even if they have a grievous injury. He had been so certain that they could kill the one-armed loudmouth with little effort. Never again. Kakashi led his team into Chuchi no Kuni, Land of Earth. The allied shinobi had done an excellent job of securing the countryside and they were unchallenged as they crossed the border. Awagakur doesn't have much left to fight us with. Do you think this will be at all challenging? Sasuke asked his teammates. Remember what kills shinobi Sasuke, Kakashi replied. One of the first lessons Kakashi had drilled into his team was that overconfidence led to shinobi being killed. It was a lesson that Sasuke had struggled with, but one that he did adhere to. When it came time to fight, he never let his guard down. Though he did still toy with opponents at times, much to Kakashi's annoyance. Naruto grinned. Don't worry Kakashi-sensei, we'll make sure Sasuke doesn't bite off more than he can chew. The Uchiha grinned at his comrade and brother-in-arms. There was no malice behind the words. They were united against a common enemy. That didn't stop him from wishing he could test his abilities at full power against him. Unfortunately, with the forces they could wield, it was simply too dangerous. Sakura rolled her eyes. Boys. Kakashi couldn't help but bark out a laugh. He had gotten quite lucky with his team. He couldn't help but wonder what another sensei would have done with the three. The four kept their pace comfortable, which meant that to others they looked like they were dashing at top speed. At one point they were stopped by a Suna patrol. The Sand Ninja were nervous at stopping what was clearly a squad of Jonin-level shinobi. Yes, they bore the symbol of the leaf, but that didn't mean they were actually leaf shinobi. With their masks on, it wasn't obvious who they were either. Kakashi preferred it that way until they met with their Suna contact. It was certainly possible that there were Iwa or Akatsuki spies in the area. Kakashi stepped forward while his three students stopped a small bit away. We are on a mission. Here is the scroll as well as our verbal code. The shinobi looked it over twice to be sure and then breathed a sigh of relief. Good luck, Anbu-san. Kakashi nodded and his team headed toward the destination. They would be meeting with Kankuro. Assuming their intelligence was good, Iwa would soon need to launch their reprisal or let their towns fall. The Earth Daimyo was in hiding, and if they didn't act soon the land of Earth would be lost. It wouldn't mean the fall of a Wagakur, but it would signal the end of the village as an international power. Without the resources of a great nation to draw upon, they could not stay supplied or have a stream of potential shinobi. Sakura was the one most looking forward to seeing Kankuro again. One couldn't be a puppet master without a solid Fuinjutsu base. Hopefully he wouldn't mind showing off his work. While shinobi guarded their secrets, many young and powerful shinobi could be quite arrogant in bragging about their skills. While Kankuro was actually older than her, intelligence on him was that he fit the bill. Besides, they were allies, so he shouldn't be too on guard, she hoped. Break. Neji's team was returning to Hai no Kuni proud of their success. No blows had been exchanged, not even an attempted strike on them by Kumo. It was a reason to be happy. The samurai for the most part would stay out of the war. The potential of 10,000 samurai aiding Iwa and Kumo was a specter that could have changed the war. Instead, there would be less than 1,000 involved, and almost half of them had been convinced that Jiraiya was being true to his word about seeking a lasting peace. This had been somewhat of a surprise to the three, and they had waited for orders on just where to take the samurai. Tenten had wanted them to come to the village as she was already getting along quite well with several of the better blade masters. Their friendly spars were quite educational for the weapons mistress. The kunoichi was better than most of them by a strong degree, even in a direct fight. Two of them had actually won their spars though, and Tenten was thrilled with the challenge they presented. Neji wasn't quite so sure. What exactly would they do in Konoha? It seemed unlikely that the village would be attacked after so convincingly driving back the massive invasion force. His thoughts proved accurate as they received a message from the Hokage to bring them to the capital of Hai no Kuni. The samurai would serve in liaison with the Fire Daimyo, who had sent repeated requests for more shinobi in case of another attack. The samurai captain was a middle-aged, level-headed warrior by the name of Yasuyuki. He was one of the few who had bested Tenten. It will be an honor to meet your Fire Daimyo. We have come to assist in ending the war. If this is where we can be of best use, we will be glad to fight under his banner. However, we will not obey any dishonorable directives. Of course, Neji replied. I am certain the Daimyo will rest easier knowing you are protecting him and his family. Break. Kankuro was pleased with the war. He got to test out a new puppet, and his name was becoming well known throughout the Suna shinobi force. His name was well known before this, but only as the old Kazekage's son or the brother to a monster. Now his name was used with respect due to his own abilities. Unlike many puppeteers, he was also an adrenaline junkie. He loved the thrill of battle. He was more thankful than ever that the Kazekage had decided to honor their alliance with Konoha. He glanced up as one of his men brought to him the Anbu commander from Konoha. You're it. 4 shinobi. I thought we were going to be facing a strong counterattack from Iwa any day now. Kankuro had over 150 shinobi spread out around the largest settlement near Wagakur itself. Despite his superior skill, they were going to need a lot more shinobi. The man behind the Anbu mask smiled. Kankuro-san, let's go to your tent and I'll reveal to you who we are. The puppeteer shrugged and invited them into his tent. His puppets were ready to strike if they proved false. It wasn't likely. The two villages had placed a premium on secure communications, and these shinobi were expected. Kankuro saw the vanquisher of Sabaku no Gara, Gara of the desert, unmask himself. He quickly altered the thought. He had taken off his nondescript Anbu mask, but he had left on the mask underneath. Nonetheless, it was obvious that he was talking to Kakashi. The other three took off their masks, and Kankuro looked on with surprise. Konoha had sent the best. It had been a while since he had laid eyes on Kakashi's team. They had defeated their fair share of Suna shinobi during the invasion. Reports had stated they had defeated Chunin as well as Jonin while they were still genin. And then there was the genin exams in Kumogakure. Since that event their rise in strength and power had reshaped the world. Kankuro knew that Baki was grateful to Konoha for setting aside vengeance for the ill-fated assault on the Leaf Village. But he also wondered if the strength of these 4 shinobi was the overwhelming consideration in adhering to the alliance. Kakashi-sama, you may not know this but you are considered a hero in Sunagakure. Oh, hi. When you killed my brother you freed us from his reign of terror. Naruto narrowed his eyes. If he had a different sensei, if he didn't have Iruka and Kakashi he may have ended up just like Gaara. But it would be impolitic to push that. The Suna Jonin had meant it as a compliment for their sensei. I took no pleasure in it. I am curious as to what happened to the Ichibi. It should have risen by now. Kankuro knew that information was classified and simply shrugged. Baki-sama might know but he's been tight-lipped about it. Village secret and all. They began talking about the plan for the likely battle. Kakashi took charge. My team has a number of highly lethal large area jutsu. Primarily I want your shinobi to be positioned behind us to the right and the left by a good 2,000 feet. Your job will be to ensure we aren't completely surrounded. The Suna commander wasn't exactly thrilled at not playing a more pivotal role. You're good but so am I. Let me stand with you and you'll see what I can do. Kakashi was about to dismiss the idea, not wanting an added part to his perfectly honed machine of death, but Sakura caught his lone visible eye. Kakashi-sensei knows all of our abilities and uses them in the best possible way. I believe that you are strong but you'll need to explain exactly what you can do and how you are going to do it in order to be in such close proximity. He grinned. Well fair enough, let me show you this. Kankuro flexed his chakra strings and Saraizarinku rose up from the ground. Saraizarinku was his most powerful puppet. It looked like some ungainly hybrid of mole and snake that was over 30 feet long from tip to head. This is the perfect defense against Iwa Doton Jutsu. It is made out of the best material and has a number of surprises for any challenging foe. Sakura got close and examined the seals and began asking innocuous questions pretending to be in awe of the creation. Kakashi was amused and not too upset. The battle would be a very fluid event and if they needed to separate from the puppeteer they could do so easily. After she finished her inspection and her questions she abruptly thanked Kankuro and the 4 of them lifted their masks. Now all that was left to do was wait and see if Iwa would strike. It was the likely choice for any counter-attack. It didn't mean that is what Iwa would do but Shikaku Nara was rarely wrong and Kakashi agreed with the analysis. Kankuro was glad to have such powerful help. He also wanted to see how his own abilities measured up to these up-and-coming legends. ***. Kiba Inuzuka was leading his own team on patrol on the borders of Hai no Kuni. He and his partner's sharp senses made him a highly sought-after commodity. He missed Hinata and Shino, they had been a superb team. He missed Hinata especially though that was for other reasons as well. They were both the head of their respective clans. At a younger age he would have felt intimidated that both of his teammates were above him but he had matured. Now he was a Jonin and leading his own team. The combination of Inuzuka, Aburame and Hyuga had proven itself and the thought was if something could be great once why couldn't it be great again? With him were an experienced Genin Hyuga branch member and a Chunin Aburame. The team was rounded out by a clan-less medical nin who had graduated Sunid's training courses. Sunid was a big proponent of having a medical nin in every squad. After the destruction of the hospital that wasn't going to be possible for a long time, but this team would have a healer. He sniffed the air and looked concerned. He signaled his team to stop. There was a foreign scent in the air. The Aburame Kunoiki sent some of her bugs to investigate while the Hyuga used his dojutsu. The Genin whispered, I count 8 shinobi. Their headbands suggest they are from Omegakure no Sato, village hidden by rain. Kiba looked stunned. Why would shinobi from Omegakure be in Hai no Kuni? Surely they couldn't be thinking to ally with Kumo and Iwa after almost every single other minor village sided with Konoha. It would be suicide. We will pursue but we won't ambush. I'm going to try to talk to them first. Kiba and Akamaru formed up in front and broke through a clearing. Like much of Hai no Kuni the area was heavily forested. I think you guys are lost, the border is back that way. Kiba was expecting surprise, shock or fear. He had not been expecting an immediate attack. Two of the shinobi hurled kunai at him while the others scattered into the trees. The thrown kunai weren't much of a threat and Kiba easily dodged them and roared out a challenge. He raced toward the shinobi who had thrown the kunai with feral speed. Not bothering to even use a jutsu, he rushed them and pulverized the first with pure taijutsu. His opponents weren't weaklings but they were chunin at best and he was a jonin taijutsu specialist. After dealing with the two of them he made a pair of mud clones to go protect the others in his squad while he began to hunt down his opponents in the trees. They were just in time too as a swarm of senbon blasted the area. One of Amnin had used Juro senbon shower. The clones hastily put up earthen walls that shielded Kiba's troops. They also weren't idle though, as after the senbon attack the Hyuga began his own close-quarters fight with a katana-wielding foe. The Aberrane brought her insects to bear, enveloping one of their opponents and draining him of his chakra. Kiba dealt with another two and avoided the blast of a deadly whip of water and finished the fight. Their opponents weren't bad but they were outclassed. 6 of them were dead and 2 of them were taken prisoner. Kiba wouldn't do the interrogation himself. Better leave that to the experts like a Baki. We are heading back. Keep an eye out until we get back to Konoha. Break. It was never wise to bet against Anara, and the Konoha team was glad that they were in the right place. The Suna scouts had picked up a massive force coming from a Wagakure and it was heading straight for them. Naruto hadn't made his clones yet, that would be part of the surprise. Sakura activated some of her last-minute adjustments she had made the night before. Kankuro had some clever ideas though they weren't earth-shattering, so to speak. She did like the way his use of the puppet to burrow underground could protect him from Doton attacks. In the future she could use the same principle to do something similar, but for now she contented herself with the knowledge most Doton attacks wouldn't be able to pierce her suit. The mass of shinobi grew closer. They were not moving at running speed. If the Suna forces retreated it would allow supplies to cross between the village and the town, which was their main objective. Still the Iwa shinobi looked eager. Suna was outnumbered by over 20 to 1. An easy victory would no doubt do much to assist Iwa's morale. Juro Suzumori grew concerned as his army neared their opponents. The Suna shinobi were dug in and not looking like they were planning to flee. Why wouldn't they flee against a force his size? His instincts warned him that he should stop and investigate, but the shinobi around him had their blood up. They needed this victory. But he didn't have to be foolish about it. He gave the signal for mud and earth clones to be created and scores of them raced ahead of his units. As they got closer and drew near they realized it wasn't just Suna they were facing but also Konoha Anbu. The clan head was too far away to notice anything in particular about his opponent's stance, their weaponry or any other telltale clues that would identify them. They hadn't even moved, which meant he couldn't sense them through the tremors in the ground. But he knew. Oh no. He instantly barked out orders telling his squads to scatter as widespread as possible. As soon as his orders began being followed, the Konoha shinobi leaped into action, perhaps realizing they were found out. Suddenly the 4 shinobi turned into 200. A wave futon, Shinkugyoku, wind release, vacuum bullets, powered bullets smashed through the earth clones like a hot knife through butter. At the same time the shinobi who had summoned those clones was completing his jutsu. Chakra saturated the air and it seemed to press in and around the Iwa shinobi. Juro hastily began creating a great barrier of rock overhead and ordered his shinobi to begin constructing more beneath it. He only had seconds and he needed to push more chakra into it. Those seconds ran out as the tremendous tidal wave of condensed air screamed from the heavens. It shattered the rock utterly, but some of the lethal power was reduced. It was slightly reduced again as it shattered the secondary barriers. Still fiercely dangerous, the Namikaze's jutsu reached flesh and bone. Despite its power and despite the casualties, Suzumori knew his actions had saved hundreds of other shinobi. He stuffed a chakra pill in his mouth and shook loose the debris and raced forward alongside his brethren. The earth itself seemed alive as it raced toward the cage bunchen ahead of them. Dragons, spears, mud balls and all sorts of Doton jutsu careened forward. The battle was joined and Juro knew that even if they won the price would be high. Break. Naruto bit back a frustrated curse. His futon, Sora Tonkachi, wind release, sky hammer, had not been nearly as effective as he had hoped. Between the clones and his powerful but draining jutsu he had dropped out of sage mode. He still had 2 clones nearby that were brimming with nature energy, but using a third for such paltry results wasn't the best way to get started. Kankuro stared at the Namikas with shock. What are you complaining about? That attack might have killed 100 of them. But Naruto didn't respond. Kankuro though backed away as he sensed demonic chakra begin to radiate out from his ally. He couldn't help but feel the familiar fear that Gaara had held over him for so long. It was easy to forget with Naruto's personality that he was also a Jinchuriki able to call upon a sealed Biju. He was so intent on looking at Naruto that he missed the next wave of attacks by Konoha's combat team. Sakura had launched one of her kunai within a kunai. It whipped out with tremendous force from the gloved part of her suit and she manually triggered the seal once it sailed past the Naruto clones. The storage seal triggered and a blast of pressurized air sent 40 more kunai careening out in a forward arc. A moment later those 40 kunai each unsealed their payloads. 1600 kunai delivered deaths. But they weren't just kunai, all of them had something that made them deadly. Some had explosive tags trailing behind them. Others had explosive seals written on them that detonated and sent shrapnel everywhere. Some were laced with poison. Others blew apart and released poisonous gas or acidic spray. Many Iwa shinobi died, however they were perhaps the most resilient to such attacks. Doton, Doruheiki, Earth Release, Mud Wall, littered the battlefield and had saved countless lives. Still the damage was done and the forward momentum was stopped. The Cage Bunshin previously summoned now drew their katanas and charged forward. Their speed and skill made them greater than all but the best Jonin weapon specialists. Their only weakness was that just a scratch would dissipate them but most of their opponents died before that scratch could be delivered. Naruto had finished his jutsu and summoned the mighty Gameiken. The toad bore his Sasumata and shield and was ready for a fight. Kankuro turned and saw the battlefield had changed again and belatedly realized that Konoha really was doing all the work. He saw Naruto use a Shunshin and summon another toad. He repeated it with a third like it was nothing. It probably wasn't nothing considering the demonic energy seemed to be faint now but it was mightily impressive to summon 3 giant battle toads to the battlefield. Sasuke and Kakashi were ready for the inevitable underground assault and as soon as the burrowing Iwa Nin popped up they were decimated. Kankuro could barely follow their quick and lethal movements. Saraizarinku only managed to kill 1 shinobi. This was embarrassing. On the other hand it was also quite gratifying to be on this side of the battlefield. The Iwa forces were being decimated but the scouts hadn't fully realized just how many shinobi were coming. Now more spread out the force seemed absurdly large. The flanks of the battlefield saw more clashes as Suna Nin began fighting with the numerically superior Iwa Nin. Iwa was not without its summons either. Great bears and goats rose up. None were anywhere near the size of the toads but they were dangerous to a shinobi. And in all that chaos his allies began advancing into the teeth of the fighting. Kankuro brought Saraizarinku with him, going through the ground providing protection against the random spikes of earth. Other threats had to be physically dodged though his allies did a great job of swatting them down before they arrived. He saw several Iwa shinobi working in concert and no less than 10 Doton, Dosekiru, Earth Style, Earth Dragon, snaked around the mighty toads and raced directly at their position. The Uchiha stepped up and a shimmering blue armor surrounded him and the stone dragons crashed into it without any effect, crumbling, their power and momentum stopped utterly. Other Iwa shinobi began battling each other. Did Konoha plant sleeper agents? No, that wasn't it. It was the pink-haired Kunoiki beside him. She was using genjutsu with speed and effect that beggared belief. He snapped out of his awestruck daze when a shinobi tried to impale him with a kunai. That poor fool was snapped in half by his puppet and he vowed to stop gawking and pay attention. Break. Juro fought off the Cage Bunshin with his mastery of Doton. Rocks shattered in mid-air sending tiny fragments toward any of the clones that drew near him. It was the only thing that kept him alive as the clones seemed to focus their efforts on attacking strong shinobi. The weak ones no doubt weren't worth bothering with. All sense of strategy was lost at this point. Mayhem reigned and in the chaos his people died. A comparison couldn't be made to the last time he had fought this hated team. Back then the clones weren't able to surpass even Jonin in single combat. Back then they didn't have 100+ allies keeping their flanks secure. And back then Iwa had its own monstrous summons like Maru and Atratus. To say nothing of Han. And kunai scrolls were never this lethal. Konoha had advanced while Iwa had weakened. He had more shinobi than he had at that battle but previously it had all been experienced or highly skilled shinobi. Now half his force was made up of virtual children who should still be doing C-ranked missions, not thrown into the rage of war. Retreat at this point would leave hundreds dead with nothing achieved. Juro pressed on, knowing full well that success was unlikely. But a Wagaku would fall if the Namikaze wasn't dealt with once and for all. He stuffed the remaining chakra pills he had on him in his mouth and raced forward toward the real Naruto. Break. Sasuke saw the fight through his Sharingan clearly. Naruto was an army killer. Even Susanoo paled before the strength of clones, his perfected wind jutsu and 3 massive summons. Sasuke could have brought some snakes on the field, but he preferred to keep his chakra ready for other abilities. Thanks to his Sharingan and having Kakashi as his sensei, he knew more jutsu than he could realistically use in a single day. But what called to him was his ocular powers. His dojutsu immediately picked out the enemy commander. He had fought him before. Juro Suzumori, one of the best Iwa had to offer. Let's see how he handles a fully matured Sharingan. Sasuke moved to intercept him. When he was at 30 feet he used Amaterasu. Experienced shinobi sometimes had something likening to a sixth sense. Maybe this Juro fellow had more than just his tremor sense when it came to his sensory powers. In either case the black flames were stopped by a thin sheet of earth that had risen from the ground. No matter. Sasuke next used Chidori Senbon and filled the air with electrified deaths. Juro contorted and dodged and countered with his own spikes of earth underneath Sasuke's feet. Sasuke easily danced forward and dodged the earth lances from the ground while bringing himself closer to the clan head. Juro attempted to encase him in stone, but a taste of Susanoo broke the attack and shattered the rock that had tried to envelope him. Sasuke counter-attacked with a sweep of his chakra constructs blade that forced his opponent to use the substation technique. Against an Uchiha the technique wasn't nearly as useful, as they would instantly know where a user went. Sasuke was no exception. He dropped the Susanoo and lashed out with a Chidori spear. Despite just coming out of the Kawarimi, Juro managed to dodge most of the lance of Raiten energy, though he lost an inch of flesh from his arm. Kakashi blazed forward. Sasuke was somewhat irritated that he wouldn't be able to finish the duel, but knew that Kakashi would never see it that way. Combat was a place for victory, not other considerations. With a shrug he followed his sensei, calmly dispatching a few Iwa shinobi who also tried to leap into the fight. Break. Juro knew his days were numbered. The Konoha shinobi were too strong. Maybe if they still had a Jinchuriki but there was no time for recriminations at this point. His last duty was to try to take one of these monstrous shinobi down before they took him out. Unfortunately for Suzumori, being attacked by Sasuke and Kakashi at the same time meant he had no chance of escape. His attempt to go to ground failed when a massive purplish blade slammed through his body just as he let the rock envelope him. Death came nearly instantaneously. Break. Despite the death of Juro and the many advantages that the Konoha, Suna alliance had on the battlefield, the Iwa shinobi did have numbers. It was not a quick battle, as even Team 7 grew tired and close to chakra exhaustion from the slaughter. And it was a slaughter. Rivers of blood soaked the earth as the decimation continued. The final few hundred Iwa shinobi broke and fled just as the chakra pills started coming out for Konoha. Naruto had the most energy left despite re-summoning his Kage Bunshin. He was also the one most disgusted with the massacre. He had over 400 impressions of death and mutilation to process since his clones' memories were his own. This kind of war sickened him. He knew why Jiraiya was so determined to have peace. Sending out a team had been nerve-wracking, and he had started doubting whether he was actually the best choice for Hokage. The pressure was immense. But now he would take the mantle. And he would fight for peace as hard as he could. He would end this war and ensure no one dared make war again. Killing 11-year-old genin who had fought bravely for their village made him nauseous. But it was finally done. Iwa was broken and their army was fleeing back to the dubious safety of their village. Jiraiya was cautious, and it was unlikely they would be sent to finish of the village. The Akatsuki would know Naruto was here, and so the likely course of action was a swift return to Konoha. Even if Kumo realized the strongest Konoha team had left the village, there was no way they would be able to steal a march before they returned. Naruto could see the map in his mind's eye. Sooner forces would continue to strangle the life out of the land of Earth, and either Iwa would have to surrender or completely abandon the various towns and cities that supported their hidden village. Either prospect meant the inevitable decline of Iwa as a major power. In a generation they would be like Kasagakure. A notable village but one regulated to being in the shadows of their betters. Break. Kankuro shivered, glad to see the Konoha shinobi leave. The power they had at the disposal was terrifying. He knew that they were not invincible. He had seen them finally slow down and grow weary. They were still human. For now. But the price to wear down 4 shinobi. Almost 2,000 shinobi, and while they had been weary they had still been incredibly dangerous. Kankuro was prideful but he knew that Konoha could crush his village with just those 4. His tactical eye knew that the only way to win such a fight was to wear them down, never group up and never let them rest. But even then what could stop them if they wished to retreat? They could break out of any encirclement. He would have a long talk with his sister when he returned to Sunagakure proper. She needed to see that Suna needed the alliance with Konoha. If Konoha ever became their enemy they would be annihilated. That will be it for this video. If you want more, comment down below, like, subscribe. And see you guys later.